First of all, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and leave a like, because what you're about to hear isn't ordinary news. It's a behind-the-scenes lesson on power and living history unfolding before our eyes. Imagine waking up and discovering that the world is once again playing with the same fire that nearly destroyed it decades ago. That's exactly what's happening. Donald Trump, in one of the most controversial decisions of the century, broke a 33-year silence and authorized American nuclear tests again. Some call him a strategic genius, others, a global arsonist. But the question remains, are we witnessing a maneuver to guarantee peace, or a provocation capable of reigniting the flames of war? And what's most intriguing is the paradox. The man who claims to want to protect the world may be the same one who brings it to the brink of collapse. The line between peace and power has never seemed so thin, and perhaps that's why this topic is so unsettling. Because deep down, we all know, when someone presses the button of history, no one comes out unscathed. And it is in this scenario that the truth begins to reveal itself. A return to the past. The end of the 33-year moratorium. It was as if the clock of history had jumped back. When Trump announced the end of the nuclear moratorium that had lasted since the early 1990s, the whole world felt a chill down its spine. That 33-year pause was not just a technical agreement, but a symbolic pact between nations tired of the atomic threat. It was as if humanity had finally learned from Hiroshima, Nagasaki, and the Cold War. And now suddenly, the echo of the past resonated again in a tone of warning. The 1990s were marked by a rare hope that peace would last. Non-proliferation treaties, joint inspections, and diplomacy seemed to have put an end to a race that almost cost the planet. But time passed, and the promises of security became museum pieces. Trump's decision, under the guise of strategic modernization, reopened old wounds and reignited debates that the world believed it had overcome. Imagine the global psychological impact. Entire nations reliving the fear of an invisible war, where the enemy is not seen but felt. The mere sound of the words nuclear test evokes memories of underground bunkers, sirens, and apocalyptic headlines. The return of the tests, even if symbolic, sends a powerful message that peace, perhaps, has never been as fragile as it is now. And what is most unsettling is that this may only be the first step in something much larger, something that is not yet fully visible. The American justification: security or political provocation. In official speeches, the White House spoke of national protection, of ensuring that the American nuclear arsenal is prepared to respond to any threat. Trump, with his characteristic rhetoric, stated that might is the only language some countries understand. For his supporters, this stance sounded like patriotism, for the rest of the world like a red alert. After all, to what extent does security become synonymous with intimidation? The line is thin, and power, when poorly managed, has the terrible habit of turning into arrogance. Behind the scenes, defense experts argue that technological advancements require new tests, especially given the arms development of China and Russia. But there's a political component that no one ignores. Each underground explosion also serves as a spectacle. In times of economic instability and electoral disputes, nationalism becomes a convenient fuel. Showing strength is a way to divert public attention from internal weaknesses. It's the old tactic of many empires. When chaos grows within, an enemy is created outside. But this display of power comes at a high price. Allied countries have begun to question the real need for these tests. If the intention is to preserve peace, why reopen the door to fear? Perhaps the real test is not that of the warheads, but that of global maturity. Trump seems to know this, and it is precisely this ambiguity that keeps him in the spotlight. The world watches, divided between the belief that he wants to protect and the fear that he is, in fact, provoking something much bigger, something that his next move may make clear. The global impact, Reaction from Russia, China, and NATO allies. Trump's announcement landed like a diplomatic bombshell, no pun intended. Moscow reacted with irony, but the cold tone masked unease. Russia responded by announcing strategic reviews of its own nuclear program, a euphemism for, if the United States tests, we can too. Beijing, in turn, accused Washington of disrupting the global balance and putting the planet on a collision course with history. The old rivalry between the powers was rekindled, and, like on a chessboard, every move was calculated with millimeter precision. Meanwhile, NATO allies found themselves in an awkward dilemma. On one hand, political and military loyalty to the United States. On the other, the fear that the world was heading back towards an uncontrollable arms race. France and Germany called for caution and dialogue, but the unease was evident. What had previously seemed like just an isolated decision of American domestic policy began to affect the global balance of power, and the fear that silence in the face of this could be interpreted as approval spread among foreign ministers and diplomats. The headlines left no doubt. Yesterday's peaceful world was once again living in the shadow of nuclear weapons. Investors felt the impact in the markets, and even the stock exchanges reacted nervously. After all, peace is also a financial asset, and no one profits in a scenario of atomic uncertainty. The tense atmosphere sparked an inevitable question. Does the planet need fear again to maintain balance? A question that resonates deeply when the next topic comes into play. The moral dilemma and the risk of escalation. The moral dilemma and the risk of escalation. The question now is no longer merely political, but existential. To what extent does a leader have the right to play with forces capable of annihilating his own species? Trump argues that peace only exists when the enemy is afraid. But this view is a dangerous legacy of the Cold War, an era in which balance was maintained not by trust, but by mutual terror. It is the paradox of deterrence. The more weapons accumulate, the further away true peace becomes. The world watches, divided between the pragmatism of defense and the moral outcry that says, enough of fear disguised as security. Religions, philosophers, and even former generals have raised the same point. Power without wisdom is destruction waiting to happen. If the goal is to avoid war, why rekindle a dormant fire? It's like a firefighter who, to prove their efficiency, decides to start small fires just to show they know how to put them out. The risk is that, at some point, the fire will get out of control. And it is precisely at this point that the world begins to realize how much the decisions of a few can compromise the fate of many. While fiery speeches gain prominence in the halls of power, fear is once again taking on a face in the streets. Entire generations who grew up believing that nuclear weapons were a thing of the past now see their children asking, "Mom, is the world going to end?" And perhaps the real test lies not in underground laboratories, but in the collective conscience. Because if morality is lost along the way, no treaty will be able to rebuild what has been destroyed. And this reflection leads us to the most unsettling point of all. The future that is beginning to take shape on the horizon. The uncertain future. A new equilibrium or the spark of instability. The world is facing a new chessboard, and this time no one knows who is really in charge. Trump's resumption of nuclear testing has set a precedent that could redefine the concept of global security. Some see this move as an attempt to create a new kind of equilibrium, where fear once again becomes the guardian of peace. Others see a spark about to ignite an era of distrust and hostility. The curious thing is that, while leaders debate treaties and numbers, the average citizen feels only the weight of uncertainty hanging over tomorrow. Historically, every time humanity believed it had tamed power, it exacted a high price. From atomic energy used to illuminate cities to the bombs that devastated Hiroshima, the line between progress and destruction has always been thin. Now, with technology advancing faster than ethics, the question is no longer, "With we can," but if we should. Does the future of peace depend on who has the most powerful bomb, or on who has the courage to abandon it? This question, more than any missile, is what keeps the world in suspense. And amidst this turmoil, Trump seems to understand the game he's playing well. He knows that every provocation, however dangerous it may seem, also generates influence, power, and narrative. The planet, once again, revolves around tension. And while the powers pretend to negotiate, there's an almost prophetic feeling in the air that we are about to witness a historic turning point. A turning point that could seal the fate of the world, or pave the way for something that few can yet imagine. Ultimately, the question that remains is simple, but frightening. Is the world preparing for peace, or for the next war? The return of nuclear testing is not just a political event. It's a signal, a silent warning that something much bigger is in motion. The pieces are being put in place, and those who observe carefully can already see that the rhetoric has changed. The treaties have weakened, and alliances are reorganizing behind the scenes. And that's why you need to go beyond the headlines. You need to understand the signs of the next great war. The same ones that newspapers ignore, but who are shaping the future right now. That's why I prepared the ebook, Signs of the Coming Great War. There, you will discover how these events connect with the economy, politics, and even ancient prophecies. Download now while it's still available. The link is in the description and in the pinned comments. Now tell me, do you think all of this is just a coincidence, or has the clock of history started ticking again? Leave your opinion in the comments, share this video with someone who needs to open their eyes, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the upcoming analyses about what's really happening behind the scenes of power. The next war may have already begun, only silently.